From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Wednesday, April 9, 2025. Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton have faced off in the first debate of this election campaign, a clash that inevitably turned fiery.
In the 2014 budget, $30 billion was ripped out of public schools in that budget. $50 billion was ripped out of hospitals.
That is not a factually correct statement. It's misleading, it's designed to scare people, and I think it's dishonest from a man who wants to be re-elected as the Prime Minister of our country. In 40 years, there has not been a higher spending government than your government. Is that correct?
Well, that's not true, except for the one that you were a part of.
The Greens are pitching their campaign at Australia's 7 million renters, with leader Adam Bandt at the Press Club on Wednesday to demand capital gains tax breaks and negative gearing be axed, and a freeze on rent increases. All the latest from the campaign and our experts' analysis is live now at theaustralian.com.au. Australian Super has finally called in the police to investigate a hack that saw $406,000 drained from an elderly customer's superannuation account. But the scandal has revealed huge holes in super funds' ability to keep our money away from criminals, or even to allow us to log into their websites to find out how much money we have left. Today, is our money safe in super? Towards the end of March, a 74-year-old Queensland woman received some correspondence from her superannuation fund. We'll call her Joan. Australian Super was writing to Joan, it said, to confirm withdrawals made from her account a week earlier. That's odd. Joan hadn't made any withdrawals, much less for $100,000 at a time. And it wasn't just one. Joan realised with increasing horror that 6 withdrawals totalling $406,000 had been made from her super over the space of a week. When she alerted the super fund to the fraud, she expected a swift response. But for 10 agonising days, it was crickets. The fund failed to raise the incident with the Commonwealth Bank and didn't commit to covering the loss until the Australian's business reporter Cleona O'Dowd started asking questions almost 3 weeks after the attack began. And Joan's not the only one caught up in this mess.
Several Australian superannuation funds have been targeted by cyber criminals. It's caused panic and frustration for thousands of members who've been unable to check whether their nest egg has been impacted.
Jared Lynch is the Australian's technology editor. Jared, the story of Joan and her loss of $406,000 from her super fund is just staggering. And what does that tell us about the safety of all of our funds?
It tells us that our safety is expendable and can be cracked within seconds by anyone who's got the will to be able to do that. How they've been able to get in, the hackers, is that they've got a heap of people's usernames. They've either tried to get a heap of passwords from the dark web from previous breaches, or they've done what's called a brute force attack, which is to keep guessing, scrambling, guessing until you get in through the door. And because there's no multi-factor authentication, which means you get a notification on your phone or through a third-party app to verify yourself, that means that they can walk straight in through the door and do what they like with your account.
How big is this, Jared, compared to other hacks that we've seen of major companies like, for example, Optus?
Australia Super would love to compare it to Optus, saying that, well, they had the data of 9.5 million Australians stolen. We've only had a very small problem here. And that, of course, has been the problem with the super funds, which is why they've been so lax when it comes to cybersecurity. And I'm not saying this. The Australian Securities and Investments Commission is saying this. They said it back in January, saying that your weak online security is exposing your members to scams. Do something about it. And rather than doing something about it, the Association of Super Funds of Australia CEO said, you're raising unnecessary alarm. Super funds are the safest places in Australia to put your money. So nothing happened. And as a result, we've now seen this huge cyber attack because they thought, well, it's only a little problem. Well, little problems can turn into big problems, to paraphrase Paul Kelly from Little Things, Big Things Grow, and that is indeed what is happening.
4 super funds were targeted by cybercriminals in the coordinated attack: Australian Super, Australian Retirement Trust, Host Plus, and REST, the Retail Employees Superannuation Trust. They manage almost $1 trillion in retirement savings on behalf of thousands of Australians, like Joan, who's one of 4 Australian Super customers confirmed to have lost money in the hack. Australian Super is still combing through the 600 accounts that were breached, while other funds scramble to reassure their anxious customers.
And no suspicious transactions or changes have been detected on member accounts.
We recognise how frustrating this can be and sincerely appreciate your patience.
An unusually high spike in login attempts,
We are experiencing a high volume of calls to our contact centre, resulting in a longer than normal wait time.
So, Jared, now we get to the mystery of why police weren't involved right from the beginning. What are you hearing now from Australian Super about if or when the police were called?
Well, the good news is that they have contacted me today to say that we have reported it to the AFP 5 days after the hackers struck. They decided to call them the coppers, and that was only because, probably, that we did a front page story saying they hadn't called the AFP, who of course are the federal agency tasked with investigating such crimes, because as we all know, they're the ones that were able to track down the Russian hacker that was responsible for the Medibank attack back in late 22.
The AFP is undertaking covert measures and working around the clock with our domestic agencies and our international networks, including Interpol. This is important because we believe those responsible for the breach are in Russia.
Super funds, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are regulated by the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority. And when these sort of hacks happen, the APRA do a review, and if they have found that your cyber defences are inadequate or weak, then they can impose pretty harsh penalties, which is what they did with Medibank after their attack. And the same thing can happen here. The problem is we don't know what that is until probably potentially weeks or even months after the event, until the forensic analysis has been done, APRA comes in and does their investigation, and all that is very poor comfort to members who, the reason why they're with an industry super fund to begin with is they're there to profit members, not themselves. And any fines are taken from the members' pot of money. So they're up in arms saying, well, what point is it to fine the super funds? That's my money that you're taking away. And I've already been hit with this cyber attack. So it's almost like punishing the victims of crime.
The other big threat to Australian super balances right now is Donald Trump and his Liberation Day tariffs, which are draining money out of all our super balances day to day. That's why hundreds of thousands of Australians are wanting to log on and look at their super balances to see what's going on, to see how much money they've got left. Should the funds have to be able to deal with that kind of volume, Jared? Surely it's not out of the realm of consideration that everybody would want to log on all on the one day to see if their money's still there.
You're absolutely spot on there. If they're providing a service, then they've got to make sure people access it. And when you look at a massive geopolitical event, which is causing considerable anxiety, particularly as you approach preservation age, where you're about to draw down on that super, naturally you are going to want to check out what your balances are, etc. Also, the closer you are to preservation age, the more vulnerable you are to scams, because you're wanting to go in, log in, work out how you're going to manage your money, etc. And that was one of the things ASIC called out, that super trustees had no way of knowing whether someone who was approaching preservation age was being tricked and a victim of a scam. And that was one thing that ASIC called out back in January, and which their lobby group said, they're being alarmist. There's nothing to see here, more or less.
Coming up, the super funds say they're the safest place in the world to keep your money. Does that stack up? Jared, because they have so much of Australians' money under management, super funds are incredibly powerful as forces in our society in terms of what they do or don't invest in, what values they expect companies to uphold if they're going to give them our money. What are we seeing, do you think, in the balance of the way super funds themselves operate and expect others to operate?
So it's very much do as I say, not as do as I do. And one of the reasons why we haven't seen this big diversity, equity and inclusion pushback that we've seen happen in the US is because of Australia's super funds, because they sit on about $4 trillion worth of savings and use their enormous clout to push their own agenda onto Australia's top companies. That's just a reality. They're sitting on the biggest pot of retirement savings in the country and they're not afraid to flex that financial muscle. But when it comes to their own house, it's an absolute mess. They're saying it is one of the safest places in the country where you can park your money. And that is true. But what we've seen is their corporate governance is wanting. They are a soft target. They're sitting on trillions of dollars worth of retirement savings. That is a huge honeypot for hackers. And if they don't clean up their shop, make sure that they adopt the same level of governance that they demand from the likes of WiseTech and other Australian companies, then our retirement savings are at risk to these sort of data breaches, attacks, you name it. They've got to clean up their act.
Jared Lynch is the Australian's technology editor. You can read all our reporting on this hack and on the superannuation sector right now at theaustralian.com.au.